today I'm going to be talking about our current monetary system, or in other words, the fiat currency. Now, what is a fiat currency? I'll put the definition above and I'll also speak about it. Fiat currency is our current monetary system, like the dollar, the pound, the yen, etc. Now, these are basically currency that derives its value because the government say so. So it derives its value from government decree. Now, these monetary systems are not backed by anything. They're not backed by gold, silver, or any sort of underlying asset, any sort of underlying commodity. I'm going to try my best to put the definitions of any jargons I use up on the screen, because we all know this is a no jargon zone. So yeah, the fiat currency is our current monetary system. In the times that have been before, commodities were typically used as a form of our monetary system, so silver, gold, etc. What used to happen was, for people to transact or do commerce or do business, they used to use those commodities in exchange for the goods and services. And as you can imagine, there were loads of issues with that form of transaction or that form of monetary system. So one of the issues were counterfeiting. So what happened was, the people that produced these coins, or people that got hold of these coins, could debase the coins. So debasement is basically when you reduce the value of that coin or that monetary system. So for example, if you've got a piece of coin, silver coin, that has a certain percentage of silver, what people used to do was reduce the percentage of silver in this coin and essentially use that silver to make other coins and so forth. So they're debasing the value of those. So that's one of the issues that we had with the old monetary system. Additionally, if you wanted to do transaction, you can imagine you had to carry big sacks of money with you, and that poses a lot of issues. So one of them being theft, one of them being inconvenience, one of them being logistics of carrying those. If you're purchasing a huge item, you would need to carry a huge amount of sacks of money or of silver. Same with gold, same sort of issue. Debasement occurred because people found a way to debase the coins, and then it led to a stage where some sort of printing was done on the coins, so if you look at the coins nowadays, you can see the face of the queens, of presidents and so forth, or some sort of important figure. So it got to the stage where, in order to reduce debasement, they started printing these items onto the coins to make it harder for people to counterfeit it. But even then, it didn't prevent it. So over time, what happened was, we moved from silver to gold, and gold became the main form of monetary system. And again, the same issue of logistics with gold was still there. In order to reduce the amount of gold being carried by people and so forth, treasuries were created. Treasuries were just where you store the gold. And what happened was, treasuries dealt with each other, right? So if someone is carrying gold from one treasury to another, rather than everyone else carrying gold from person to person, it made things a lot safer. Of course, these can still get robbed. A note was created, a note that represented an amount of gold that you have. So if you had a certain amount of gold, you can take that to the treasury and then you'd be given a note that represented the amount of gold that you have. So this note was convertible, so you can now take that to a different city or a different place and do commerce and simply exchange that note for gold. And that's what people did. So as they did that, it made things a lot easier, as you can imagine, because these notes were not the currency was the gold. So the note was backed by the underlying asset. And then over time, what the government did was permanently made the note into the monetary system. But before we get into that, so around 1940s, prior to the war, I believe, a lot of countries, they took their gold reserves and took it to America, right? Because that was a safe place during the war period. So they left the gold there for safety reasons. and the US dollar became the currency that was backed by the gold. And a lot of currencies around the world, they back their currency with the US dollar. The US dollar, I believe, represented, so $35 represented an ounce of gold, right? So if you had $35, you had the convertibility of getting an ounce of gold, right? So the US dollar was backed by gold, and as a result of that, a lot of the currencies around the world use the US dollar to do commerce, and to this day that's still ongoing. The difference is, in 1971, I might have these dates wrong, but around President Nixon's era, he decided to make the convertibility of the dollar to the gold non-existent. So the initial agreement to make the dollar, there's a coin term for the agreement. I'm going to put it up here, which basically meant dollar represented gold. Well, he scrapped the convertibility back to that, right? And as a result, the US dollar no longer was backed by gold, and a lot of other currencies also didn't have a treasury or gold or commodity underlying asset that backed their currency. That is what the fiat currency is. The fiat currency is this piece of paper now that has its value from government decree but isn't backed by any form of commodity or underlying asset. That's our current monetary system. But just like the debasement that happened with the previous monetary system, it also happens with our current monetary system. Because it's controlled by the government and the central banks. In America, I think it's called the Fed. In UK, it's called the central bank, or the Bank of England, whatever you want to call it. The central bank, the people in charge of printing these fiat currencies. So typically, the way these currencies get into our system is through commerce, right? So when you buy something, you pay with this currency. Now what happens is, when the government needs money, they get the central bank to print that money, and they borrow it, right? They borrow that money from the central bank, or they sell bonds to the central banks in return for that money, newly printed money. However, the issue with that is technically also debasement, because the more of something you have in the system, the less value the existing something in the system has, just like gold, silver back in the day. So what happens is, the government now gets this money from the central bank, and they use it to invest in public services, etc. But what happens, the problem with our fiat system is, it keeps those initial people that get their hands on that new money wealthy, and the people who get it later on poorer. That's the issue with our monetary system. So institutions, governments, and so forth, they acquire that new money at a low interest rate, right? As you can imagine, when the government is borrowing a huge amount of money from the central bank, they'll probably be borrowing it at a very low interest rate to be paid over a long period of time, right? So the interest rate the bank is paying for that money is a lot less. But the more of that money that's in the system, the higher the interest rates go, because the cost of everything goes up now, right? So by the time this money filters down to the likes of me and you and the average person, we don't reap the rewards of that new money, because it has less value. Because what happens is, the government, institutions, equity managers, and all these sort of investment managers, all these commercial corporations at the top, they get hold of this new money first. They purchase assets at a low price, right? Because that money has more value from when it's initially been printed, right? They purchase items at a low price, right? Because that money has more value then. By the time we get hold of that money, to buy that same item, it's going to cost way more. So what happens is, we are unable to acquire these assets and just remain poor. Meanwhile, these people at the top keep on acquiring more and more and more and more. And as a result, the gap between the poor and the rich just keeps widening and widening and widening. So that is the issue with our fiat currency. That is the issue with our monetary system. And if you're thinking of storing your money away with the hopes of getting returns in the future, you're making a huge mistake, because inflation is going to devalue, inflation and debasement is going to devalue your money, right? What £1,000 could have got you 10 years ago is not the same as what it can get you now, as a result of the government doing quantitative easing or debasing the money that we have in our system, right? So yeah, that is the issue with our fiat currency. This is why a lot of people are now turning to a decentralized digital asset. For those of you who already know what I'm talking about cryptocurrency or bitcoins and the likes. That in itself is a whole nother video. But anyway, I hope I've given you guys a lesson in fiat currency. Comment below if you think I've got some of my facts wrong. Comment below if you want me to expand on anything. Comment below if you would like me to I don't know, assist in any form. Just comment below, right? And don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and just, yeah, let's keep on sharing and keep going through this journey of knowledge sharing, and hopefully it can help you, help myself, and the likes of others. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, guys. Hope to see you next time. Peace.